Most people will quit their New Year's resolution, and not because they're weak, but because the resolution was never the real problem. It was just a calendar-shaped excuse to pretend the old identity was about to die on command. And the mind doesn't work like that. The mind protects what it knows, even when what it knows is slowly killing your potential. January is always loud, promises everywhere. Fresh notebooks, gym crowds, perfectly edited new me posts, and then the silence returns. Not because motivation disappeared, but because motivation was never the engine. It was just a spark thrown onto wet wood. It flares, it looks impressive for a moment, and then reality wins again. And reality is simply this: your habits are loyal to the person you currently are, not to the person you daydream about becoming. There are people who don't like hearing that because it removes the comfort of, I just need a better plan, or I just need the right video, or I just need to feel ready. But the uncomfortable truth is that you don't rise to your goals. You fall to your standards, and standards aren't a checklist. They're an identity. They're what you tolerate, what you repeat, what you secretly accept as normal. If this is already hitting something in you, don't explain it. Don't justify it. Just leave a comment that says, Hunter, and move on. Because the men who understand this don't need to perform understanding. They just recognize it. Most people try to change their outcomes while protecting their old self, which is why their progress feels like suffering, because they are dragging a dead identity into a new life and calling it discipline. They wake up and negotiate with themselves like two enemies sharing one body. One voice wants comfort, the other wants respect. And comfort usually wins because comfort is immediate and respect is delayed. And that's why the first shift is not do more, it's be different. Because the life you say you want is built by a type of person, and if you are not that person yet, your behavior will keep betraying your ambition, not out of malice, but out of loyalty to the current identity. Look at anyone who seems disciplined from the outside. The athlete, the builder, the operator, the one who wakes up early without drama, the one who trains without filming it, the one who speaks less and executes more. And you'll notice something that ruins the whole motivational industry. They're not grinding the way you think they are. They're not fighting themselves every day. They're not forcing it with heroic willpower. They simply can't see themselves living any other way without feeling disgusted. The unhealthy meal doesn't feel like a reward to them. It feels like sabotage. The late night scroll doesn't feel like relaxation. It feels like weakness. The skipped session doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like betrayal. And that's why it looks easy from the outside, because they're not doing it for the outcome. They're doing it because it matches who they are. Most people do the opposite. They pick an outcome and try to rent an identity for 14 days. Then when the rental period ends, they go back to the original owner, the old self, the old standards, the old excuses, the old boredom disguised as comfort. And here's the part that cuts, but it cuts clean. If you want a specific outcome, you must live the lifestyle that creates it long before you deserve to show it off, because outcomes are lagging indicators of identity. You don't become later, you become first, and then the world catches up. If you're listening and you already know you've been trying to build a new life on a rotting foundation, hit like, not to help an algorithm, but because it's a small act of agreement with the part of you that's tired of the cycle. The second shift is even harder because it attacks the lie that keeps most people safe. You are not where you want to be because, on some level, you don't actually want to be there. Not in the way you claim, not with the cost included, not with the consequences included, not with the loneliness included, not with the boredom included. People say they want change, but what they mean is they want the reward of change while keeping the comfort of the old life. They want the body, but not the routine. They want the freedom, but not the responsibility. They want the confidence, but not the rejection. They want the skill, but not the repetition. And the mind hears that and chooses the only consistent option. Stay the same. Because behavior is goal-oriented, always, even the self-sabotage, even the procrastination, even the I'll start Monday, even the late-night binge when you promised yourself you were done. There is always a goal underneath it, and the goal is often protection, protection from judgment, protection from failure, protection from the discomfort of being seen trying, protection from the identity death that comes with outgrowing the person you've been. Some people will deny this because denial is also protection, but if you watch your own patterns without lying, you'll see it. You don't avoid the work because you're lazy. You avoid the work because completing the work forces a verdict, and the verdict threatens your self-image. So your mind chooses the safer goal, the one that keeps you unjudged. Delay. And that's why so many people stay in a job they hate, stay in a body they complain about, stay in a life that feels too small, because staying is familiar, and familiar feels like survival to a nervous system that never learned the difference between discomfort and danger. There are people who understand this instantly, and they usually don't talk much about it. Now, when men like that decide to change, they don't announce it, they don't negotiate it, they don't romanticize it, they don't wait for January, they don't ask permission from time, they just start behaving like the man they're becoming. And the mind follows because the mind respects evidence, not promises. That's why the third shift is brutal and liberating at the same time. Stop trusting what you say you want and start trusting what you move toward. Because movement tells the truth. Movement exposes what you value. Movement exposes what you fear. Movement exposes what you're loyal to. If you keep saying you want a different life but your days look identical, then the desire is imaginary, or it's real but too weak to compete with the comfort goal, which means you either strengthen the desire by attaching it to something deeper, or you accept the truth and stop lying to yourself. And there's a strange peace in that acceptance, because you can't fix what you won't admit, and you can't build a new identity on top of a lie you keep protecting. If this part stings, good, that sting is clarity. And if you're the type who wants clarity more than comfort, subscribe, because you already know you're not here for noise. You're here for the thing that stays when motivation dies. The fourth shift is where most people collapse, because it requires you to stop treating discipline like effort and start treating it like alignment. Effort is temporary, effort is emotional, effort depends on mood, alignment is structural, alignment is who you are when nobody's watching. Alignment is what you do even when it feels boring, and boredom is where the separation happens. Most people can do hard things for a day, even for a week, because hard things feel heroic in the beginning. But almost nobody can do boring things for months, and boring things are where real outcomes are born, because boring things are repetition, and repetition is identity formation. The mind loves drama, it loves novelty, it loves the sensation of starting, because starting feels like progress without requiring proof. But the mind hates the slow grind of evidence. It hates the quiet routine where nobody claps. It hates the day where you do the right thing and it changes nothing immediately. And this is where certain people move differently. They don't need fireworks to stay consistent. They don't need hype. They don't need a perfect mood. They don't need a fresh start. They treat routine like a shield, not a prison. They treat repetition like power, not punishment. They treat boredom like a sacred room where weak impulses die. Now here's the moment where the mirror shows up, because trading is the purest mirror most men will ever face. Trading doesn't care about your speeches. It doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care about your New Year's promises. It only pays the identity that can execute under uncertainty. And it punishes the identity that needs certainty to feel safe. You've seen it if you've traded even a little. The strategy hopping that looks like learning is often just avoidance dressed up in intelligence. The endless chart time that looks like work ethic is often just fear of pulling the trigger. The revenge trade that looks like confidence is often just wounded ego trying to restore status in the fastest way possible. And the worst part is that trading exposes this in real time. You can't hide for long because every click is a confession. When you chase a move, you're confessing that you can't tolerate waiting. When you oversize, you're confessing that you don't trust your edge, so you try to force the outcome. When you hesitate at the exact moment your model shows up, you're confessing that you want the reward without the vulnerability of being wrong. When you take profit too early, you're confessing that your nervous system is addicted to relief. When you hold a loser too long, you're confessing that you're negotiating with reality instead of respecting it. And that is why trading isn't just a money game. It's an identity game, because price doesn't just move on the chart, it moves through your psychology. This is where the CLS approach becomes more than a method, because the mechanics are simple compared to the identity required. You wait for the range, you respect the higher time frame bias, you let the market show its hand, you don't chase, you don't predict for entertainment, you don't force activity to feel productive. You observe, you execute when conditions align, and then you let the process do what it does. That's the fifth shift. Stop trying to be right and start trying to be consistent. Most people trade like they live. They want intensity, they want stimulation, they want constant action, because silence feels like emptiness to them. But the operator understands something that the masses can't tolerate. The best trade is often the one you didn't take, and the most powerful move is often waiting. Some men can't handle that. They need to be in the market the way some people need to be in drama, because activity distracts them from themselves. But the trader who moves differently treats patience like a weapon. They don't confuse being busy with being effective. They don't confuse dopamine with progress. They don't need the market to validate them every hour. They can sit in the discomfort of doing nothing, because doing nothing is sometimes the highest form of discipline. If you've ever felt that rare moment where you waited, then executed cleanly, and the trade played out without emotional chaos, you know exactly what I'm describing. And if you've never felt it yet, you've probably imagined it. And that imagination is not random. It's recognition of the kind of trader you're meant to become. Drop a comment that says, "I wait," if that identity feels more real than the one that keeps sabotaging you. The sixth shift is the one nobody wants because it removes your favorite excuse. Stop making promises you can't keep. Every broken promise to yourself is a vote for helplessness. And after enough votes, helplessness becomes your self-image. And then you don't just fail, you start expecting failure. And once you expect it, you unconsciously create it so you can feel familiar again. The mind would rather be consistently disappointed than uncertain. So if you want to change, you stop living in declarations and you start living in proof. Not proof for the internet, not proof for friends, not proof for status, proof for yourself. Because self-respect isn't a feeling, it's a ledger. And the ledger is built by small commitments kept when nobody's watching. Step one training session kept when you didn't feel like it. One clean trade taken only when your model appears. One day where you didn't break your own rules. One week where your routine didn't depend on mood. That's how identity is forged, not in dramatic reinventions, but in quiet consistency that your nervous system learns to trust. And now the final shift is not an idea, it's a protocol, because thinking your way into a new life is the trap, and action without clarity is the other trap. So this is where you go deep enough that the old identity becomes difficult to inhabit. Set aside a day, not to work hard, but to see clearly. Start with brutal inventory. Write down the exact patterns that keep repeating, not the flattering version, the real version, the one you hide, the one that shows up when you're tired, stressed, bored, lonely, or overstimulated, and write down the cost of each pattern in concrete terms. Not it's bad, but what it steals from you, what it delays, what it quietly destroys. Then write down the identity those patterns belong to, because patterns are not random, they belong to a type of man. Now write the identity you actually respect, the one you can feel in your chest when you imagine it. Not the loud fantasy, the quiet operator, the one who does fewer things but does them cleanly, the one who speaks less but means more, the one who doesn't need to be seen trying because he's too busy becoming. Then you build a bridge made of rules, not motivation. Rules that remove decisions, rules that reduce negotiation, rules that protect you from your worst self. In trading, that means rules like, I only trade when my CLS conditions align, I only risk what my plan allows, I don't chase, I don't revenge, I journal what happened, I review what happened, I treat my nervous system like part of the system, because it is. In life, that means rules like, I start the day the same way, I train on schedule, I eat in a way that supports my output, I protect my sleep, I stop flooding my mind with noise, I don't make promises I can't keep, I don't require perfect feelings to do basic standards. And then you do something most people never do. You remove one comfort that has been keeping the old identity alive. Not forever, just long enough to feel the withdrawal. Because the withdrawal is information, it shows you what you're addicted to, and whatever you're addicted to is controlling you. This is why so many men can't become consistent, because they're trying to build discipline while staying addicted to distraction. And distraction is not a harmless habit. It's a theft of attention, and attention is the only currency that buys transformation. If you're still here, you already know you're not the average consumer of motivation, because average consumers leave when the message gets quiet and confrontational, and certain people stay. And here's the ending, the part that isn't dramatic, because real shifts rarely are. Once you see that your life is the byproduct of identity, you stop begging the calendar for a miracle. Once you see that sabotage is a goal, you stop calling it laziness. Once you see that discipline is alignment, you stop waiting for motivation. Once you see that trading is a mirror, you stop treating losses like personal humiliation and start treating them like feedback. Once you see this, it's hard to move the old way, because the old way required ignorance, and ignorance doesn't survive awareness. Some paths close quietly behind you. If this resonated, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Not because you need it, but because certain reminders keep you on the line when the world tries to pull you back into comfort. And if you're serious, not emotional, not hyped, serious, leave one comment, just 3 words. I move differently.